Song of Achilles is an interesting one. It is a good book for the most part, but the problems do get very obvious when the initial depression from the end wears off. Madeline Miller's writing is genuinely beautiful, and I like Achilles' downfall arc. It was compelling and rich. You turn this sweet, innocent boy into this bloodthirsty warrior who was blinded by fame and rage, blinded by love as well. The pacing was satisfying, even though it was under the span of decades. There was nothing really wrong with the craft of it all. However, even the most perfect stories have their problems. First of all, I do agree that Achilles should have had a perspective of its own. It is a romance novel, and not having one of the couple's perspectives is a little weird and feels a tad one-sided, even though you can kind of tell that Achilles does feel something for Patroclus. I just wish it was a little bit more obvious and we got to deep dive into Achilles' psyche a bit more. Patroclus and Achilles were also way too young in their love scene together. The ages were kind of unclear throughout the entire book because it was just moving in a certain way that made it kind of hard to keep up with the ages. But then when you kind of looked back and figured out, oh, they were 16. Ew. Yeah, I didn't like that part very much, especially when you know that they stay in a tent together throughout the Trojan War in their 20s, and they could have easily been a love scene there instead, but Madeline Miller chose to do it when they were underaged. It's a little weird. I mean, you don't really need a love scene at all for a romance, let's be honest. Yeah. I did not like that at all. Funnily enough, for an author that wrote Circe, which is supposed to be this feminist fantasy Greek retelling, the female representation in Song of Achilles is kind of a dumpster fire. It's largely negative and most of it is just undercut, not really paid attention to very much. We have Thetis, who is the main female representation in this whole thing, and she's basically like this... She's the worst. She's the absolute worst. I saw this Tumblr review of The Song of Achilles. It basically described Thetis as being an American Republican mom instead of a Greek goddess, which, yeah, I can't really unsee that now that I've seen it. Now, we must come to the biggest elephant in the room, which is homosexuality wasn't a problem in ancient Greece, but that is supposed to be one of the main conflicts in this book. What? It isn't explicitly mentioned as a problem, but the book makes it a clear allegory, and using ancient Greece as the landscape kind of sounds like an ironic joke when it shouldn't be. Ancient Greece's gay culture is different from how Western culture understands it. That's the case with any culture. All places and people have their own way of expressing their sexuality, and one can't necessarily be more accurate than the other. Raya the Last Dragon was criticized for this very thing. They used a Southeast Asian landscape to showcase Western queerness. There's a whole presentation on the Raya the Last Dragon that I'll link below. It's a great in-depth look on the problem. Achilles and Patroclus' relationship being this secretive and almost forbidden-like romance makes no sense. Achilles has enough power and influence to be with whoever he wants. I would understand the story better if Achilles wanted to be loyal to Patroclus and maybe he refused to have a child because of that, because that would probably be a problem in ancient Greece. You do need to kind of continue your lineage to a certain extent, but the way the story frames it is that Thetis basically manipulates Achilles into marrying Diomede, I think her name was, and then having their child and breaking up with Patroclus. Giving Madeline Miller the benefit of the doubt, right? I did think that maybe Thetis knew Achilles was going to die because of Patroclus' death. Perhaps she thought that maybe if they separated, Achilles wouldn't get so obsessed over him and maybe he'd be alive. That theory is solid, but the issue is that Thetis could have easily gotten a male lover or something to distract Achilles. Knowing that Achilles is mostly attracted to men, Thetis could have brought someone who wasn't Patroclus, someone that Thetis could control better. That would have made more sense, but it's very clear that the framework isn't working like that. Thetis is very clearly against Achilles being with a male lover, which is super weird. Thetis is a Greek goddess or a nymph or something, whatever. She is Zeus's daughter, so she would know that Zeus himself has had a male lover. She should also know that her half-brother Achilles has 5 male lovers. I could probably believe that some people in ancient Greece could be homophobic, but a Greek goddess would not be one of them. Oh yeah, and that grandson that Thetis manipulated Achilles to make with Diomede turned out to be a real piece of shit. So thanks for that. I think it would have been a lot better if we actually just focused on Achilles' downfall instead of, I guess, spending most of the book just worrying about how homophobic ancient Greece is for some reason. Achilles' arc is genuinely so interesting, and I think in the perspective of Patroclus it makes it a lot more compelling and maybe even a little bit more heartbreaking. Also, that random love scene with Diomeda, I still don't know if that's her name. That was weird. I don't know why that love scene existed between Patroclus and Diomeda. Why are these love scenes in this book so weird? One of them is underage and the other one makes no goddamn sense. Brysis, I feel like, should have just stayed a friend. I don't know why she has a crush on Patroclus. I understand that's probably accurate to the actual story, but I didn't like it. Aside from that, I think Song of Achilles was fine. It was a good book. I enjoyed it while I read it, and even though I have problems now with it, I still don't judge anyone for liking it. I mean, I hope you don't like that underage love scene, but other than that, it's not the worst book in the world. Madeline Miller is still a talented writer, and I still want to read more of her books. I do want to read Circe at some point in time. I think the main moral of this video is just to kind of understand what you're reading, understand your own content, and not get too fooled by things, because everything is not always as it seems. It's always good to think critically of things, even if it's a book that you enjoy. I'm done now. I'm sick, and I want to go lie down. Okay, bye. Like and subscribe.